The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are tackling FAQ 2.1, which was Fantasy Flight Games released last week. This is part one of a three-part series. In part one, we're going to take a look at the Chained and Unchained cards. Part two will tackle all of the mutated cards. And finally, in part three, we'll take a look at other notable additions to the FAQ. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. You all rock. If you'd like to be amazing like these people and support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty, Nicole Fiscus, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for their contributions to the channel. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We've gotten the gang together to discuss the new FAQ that FFG dropped on the community on, I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday.
Literally, as I was heading out to play Arkham Horror, my deck got tabooed.
So we are going to break down the FAQ in several videos because there are a lot of changes to discuss, and as Matastrophic has said, we have thoughts. So those thoughts are going to take us some time to get out. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one video talking about the Chained and Unchained list. We are going to have one video talking about the mutated list, and then we're going to have another video talking about some of the other changes in the FAQ that we felt were noteworthy. So we're going to kick things off with a look at the Chained and Unchained list. The Chained and Unchained list underwent several changes. We had a whole bunch of cards removed, largely the Dunwich permanents, and we had several cards added or slightly modified. So we have Pathfinder from the Dunwich Legacy, which was originally chained to have +2 experience. That has been lowered to +1 experience. So they slightly reduced the amount of extra XP you have to play for Pathfinder. Thoughts on that change?
I like this change because I like Pathfinder as a card. And I think the game is in such a state now where if you're considering playing Pathfinder or Eon Chart, like that's a pretty meaningful decision to make now. Because while Pathfinder is, kind of always on for the most part, it doesn't provide you the same flexibility as a card like Eon Chart. Which is it's kind of a weird state in the game that we're at the point where we're considering Pathfinder to not be one of the better movement options in the game.
Oh my god. Well, I gotta be honest, like during the Mr. Rook days, like Pathfinder seemed expensive. Back when you were like, when you were Mr. Rook for like 5 cards a turn or whatever Mandy was up to at the time. So yeah, it's like three cost. Oh man, that's just way too much. I can't afford that. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Pathfinder was like appropriate at 3. It's kind of tough with a taboo list and especially with Chained and Unchained because the Chained Unchained list doesn't actually change what the cards do. They just provide like an encouragement or discouragement away from playing the cards really. There's like this like unquantifiable psychological factor that comes from just something being on the taboo list makes it taboo. And and that's something that you can't really quantify with XP, which leads some interesting stuff because it's like this is the first time is it the first time? No, it's not the first time that things have come off the taboo list entirely. And then it's like, does FFG want us to play them all the time now? Does FFG want us to just make higher education deck lists again? Like, is that what's going on? Like that right there is like more than a 3 XP change. Is that psychological factor, which is really weird. Yeah. As for Pathfinder, man, Seekers just need everything in their deck needs to cost at least 1 more XP, I swear.
Yeah, as a solo player, I have used Pathfinder extensively. I don't know if I actually paid much attention to when they tacked extra XP on it, because playing solo is hard enough. Paying extra XP for cards is, especially in solo, is I mean, you're already taxed playing solo for XP, so being double taxed is rough. I'll probably just still play Pathfinder for whatever it costs without chaining it. So I don't think this change will affect me very much. Now, speaking of the big removals, we had all of the Dunwich Legacy permanents removed, higher education, streetwise, and what's the Survivor one?
Scrapper.
Oh, yeah. But that one, Scrapper wasn't the problem one, though.
No. So I think the two big ones are higher education and streetwise. What do we think about now? In their release article, the designers said that they were removing them because the game has reached a certain state where I guess the cards aren't a problem anymore. Personally, I don't think I've seen cards that have made them not a problem. They still seem as problematic as they always have been, and nothing has been released that really changes that. So
The edge compulsion, the composures. I think that's the one thing we can compare them to. But those were like 6 XP if you took 2. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you had to draw.
permanent just makes those types of cards so ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd almost argue that it's even worse now because we have better ways of generating resources. Like when those cards were originally released, it's like emergency cash was sort of your de facto way of getting resources. But now you have things like Faustian Bargain and Crack the Case that can generate well more than 3 resources in a single action.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think my issue with these is that like by taking them off entirely, is like you hit that it crosses that psychological boundary. If they just left all 3 of them at +1 experience, they would still be on the taboo list, which has that, that taboo associated with it. When you plop it down at a table, someone goes, "Ooh, that's tabooed," but you don't have that anymore because they took them off entirely. Yeah, so I'm like,
The higher ed one is really the one that confuses me because that card is just so ridiculously pushed.
Yeah, they didn't even like mutate it or anything. Like it's kind of silly. Yeah, that one was like, especially now that like it's easier than ever to make like big hand decks that can hit the 5 card, the 5 card requirement. I mean, we got cards now that are like that require 8 in your hand, to like function at all. Yeah, and this one is like a permanent that costs only 5. It's like requires 5 cards in your hand. Yeah, it would make more sense if they really came down hard on some of the silly big hand stuff like Dream Enhancing Serum, but they didn't. So
yeah, and Streetwise, I think kind of to the same effect. It's not. I don't know if it's as powerful per se as higher ed, but I feel like in Rogue it really homogenizes playing Rogue into I'm gonna play Streetwise and then play cards that support Streetwise.
So that one I can understand because back in the day around Dunwich, you had to play Streetwise as a rogue because you didn't even have like lockpicks at that point. Like if you want to do any investigation at all, you pretty much had to do Streetwise. It's like the investigation tools, they've gotten so many more of them, like especially with like Kimani and like Thieves Kit and such. They've gotten a lot of other ways. You get like Trish now, and you got a lot of other ways to get clues. So you're not like locked into playing Streetwise. And which is kind of weird that they would like taboo it because you were locked into playing it. I hate when companies do that. They decided.
But it's still one of the better ways of
doing it. Yeah. Like by the numbers, it's great. I kind of wish they left that one on the list as well, but for a different reason than than higher education. Yeah. The problem with higher education, in my opinion, is that it's basically one of those square peg round hole solutions that like you just lean on it as a crutch and you don't really improve as an Arkham player, and you don't really like it encourages you to just blitz the game rather than like actually play the game or learn how to play the game or get better at the game or try to solve the puzzles that the game creates. No, I'm just going to like throw my resources into higher ed and just play Rex and just win the game way faster than it ever intended you to.
Yeah, I think all the permanents kind of suffer from that to some extent. I think except maybe Kenai and Scrapper, just because of the stats they boost and how they boost them.
Yeah, Scrapper, like those are the 2 combat stats, and they kind of the 2 combat stats, combat and agility. They don't really mesh well together, on the same card. And plus, they do one thing: they help you deal with enemies. Whereas, like higher ed, it helps you deal with treacheries and advance the game state.
Clues,
Yeah.
Yeah, I always felt that scrappers always ended up sort of being guilty by association rather than, guilty for anything that it actually did to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't played with higher education and Streetwise for quite a while. So, again, will I suddenly start picking these cards up? Who knows? But I mean, they are still very powerful for what they do, and it feels like just taking them off the list altogether is. I think I agree with you, Matastrophic, that maybe if they just left them at maybe +1 apiece, just to have that psychological impact that, hey, maybe you should reconsider playing. Try other ideas. Like if that's what the designers intend for this list to do, and it seems by the little write-up they did with the announcement was that they intend to use this list to push players to consider other ideas and to avoid sort of the tried and true ways of beating the game, then singling out higher education and Streetwise and saying, okay, well, these are obviously good cards, maybe try something different. would be good, but apparently they're not an issue anymore. So
I wonder if part of that is just players like in the community as a whole have sort of moved on from that, if that makes sense. Like, yes, we recognize that these things are good, but we're gonna just not play with them anyway. And I wonder if the designers sort of just take that into consideration when they think about that, because I could see, it's like you're restricting things on one end, but you want to also freshen up the list in such a way so you provide powerful tools in the opposite direction to allow players that want to experience those things to do so. But I don't know. It's like if you don't want to play with them, you can always just house rule them.
Well, you can say that about the entire taboo list. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's very true, but
yeah,
I think specifically with those permanents, it's very easy to be like, hey, can you not do that, please?
It literally does not affect your deck.
At all, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed playing with the Dunwich permanents, well, now you can do that again without having to spend extra XP. One of the cards that has been added to the chained unchained list is Sharpshooter. It is now unchained at -1 experience point. Just a quick reminder of what it does. Sharpshooter is a rogue asset, 2 cost, 3 XP, now down to 2. It has a combat and agility skill icon. The talent trait: as a response, when you use a fight ability on a firearm asset, exhaust Sharpshooter. Choose one or both. This attack uses agility instead of combat. All modifiers to your combat for this attack modify your agility instead. And use the attacked enemy's evade value for this attack instead of their fight value. I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Matastrophic, about the fact that, chaining and or unchaining cards doesn't actually change what the card does. It just changes the experience cost.
Yeah.
I don't know if many players were playing with Sharpshooter before, and I don't think subtracting -1 experience point from it is going to persuade players to play it anymore, because frankly, the card's not very good to begin with. Like, there are a lot of problems with it.
I will say this though. I remember way back when Sharpshooter came out, I took one look at it and I realized like it was not really doing anything that High Roller wasn't doing, and High Roller is 2 XP. So at least it's like the same cost as like High Roller, and now we have Dirty Fighting, years later.
Mm-hmm.
So at least you're not like punished for playing Sharpshooter. It's like it's more narrow. It's kind of more narrow than like High Roller, but it doesn't have the resource cost to use. So at least it's like the same XP now, which is that's nice. It feels appropriate. Like I don't see this card being like 1 XP. I can see it being
Yeah,
like 5 XP permanent, maybe, but that
I was
seems
gonna
kind of
say you could probably leave it as a 3 XP permanent, just because
Oh
of
yeah,
how
as a
good
3
its
XP permanent.
ability is. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
sure,
think
because it is
part of
kind
the
of narrow in its focus. Yeah.
yeah part of the problem is that the rogues that would want to take something like this either A, already have a decent combat score in and of itself anyway, or
Yep.
B, you're really only getting like a +1, maybe a +2 boost. And it's like, is that
Yeah.
really worth the amount of experience you're going to spend on this thing? And then
Yeah.
sometimes in that situation, sure, you get a boost, but then the enemy also gets a boost because you have to use the enemy's evade value.
Oh
So
well,
it's
you
like,
have that option. It's optional.
is it?
Yeah, you gotta like read it 2 times. You gotta read it like 5 times to realize
Oh,
that
choose
it's actually
choose one or both. I
or
see.
both.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I see why this came out. Like it was for Winifred, and I guess the other thing it does is lets Winifred like throw in lots of agility icons to combat tests. Like there's that subtle bit there, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay,
Yeah,
so you have that,
like
but
rogues have
it's
so
still
many wild skill icons. It's like just do that.
yeah. Oh, I understand. Yeah, that's why I'm like, it feels about right at 2 XP because at least it's like if you want to go all in on the agility icon thing, like you're not punished for it by spending more XP than like the generic version, which is High Roller.
It
Yeah, so
does
I'm like,
combo
okay.
nicely with Streetwise, so there's that. If you're into
I
that,
think so the idea is you get a 5 XP sharpshooter streetwise combo.
hmm
I think we just solved it, Nate. We just that must be what Nick and Duke are thinking. Yeah.
and then you can use the Derringer and get some extra actions.
Yep, clearly.
You're
And then you
welcome.
double or nothing the Derringer to get like 2 extra
Oh no,
actions.
that's forbidden. You can't do that. No.
Oh, I literally can't see it because it's on a whole nother page.
Personally, I would have preferred that they had mutated this to a permanent
Yeah.
rather than subtract the XP. Largely because I think this card is problematic because you need a weapon in play before it actually does anything. So you end up in that situation where I've got to draw my firearm before I draw my sharpshooter. If I draw my sharpshooter first and no gun, then I've got to play the sharpshooter, which basically does nothing. You know, I'm spending an action and resources for a blank card at that point. I think the other problem is, you know, especially with somebody like Winifred, where, you know, if they are using a firearm, they're not very good with that firearm without sharpshooter in play. So you're sort of stuck with this inadequate weapon until you get the sharpshooter.
Yep.
So you're sort of trying to fight enemies with one arm tied behind your back, which is not ideal either. And then, so, you know, giving sharpshooter the permanent keyword would have at least, you know, okay, it's on the table. Now I just need the gun and, you know, I can play as normal. I think maybe reducing the XP sort of brings it into line with some of the cards you guys were talking about. But I mean, you can also just, if you're looking for skill boosts, you can pick up, you know, Lonnie Ritter, Delilah O'Rourke, any of those good allies that will also boost your combat and do other stuff that is good.
Yeah, I agree.
And the other issue is that I think it exhausts, right?
Yeah, you got to exhaust it. So it's like
it's good for one. It's good for one shot, and if you
Yeah.
can't kill it in one shot, then you're right back into that situation where, okay, now I'm fighting with my combat again, which I didn't want to be doing in the first place.
Yep.
So, you know, if you can't kill the enemy in one shot, then you're in trouble. So I feel like there's just too many problems with the card as is.
Yeah, and playing a second one doesn't feel great because you really get minimal benefit out of it.
Oh yeah, you get to make 2 shots.
Sure.
And yeah, but if it worked on every shot, it'd probably be too good because, you know, like I keep wanting to compare it to High Roller. That exhausts. Yeah, I think this would be about right as a permanent 3 XP permanent. What you get 1 shot each round. It's still a blank permanent until you find your weapon. So it's not like Higher Ed or Streetwise where it like turns on immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 3 XP as a permanent would be like kind of perfect for this
Yeah,
thing.
because
Yeah.
like you
Hmm.
said, this is contingent on something else being on the board to do stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, like you said, like Streetwise and Higher Ed just work basically from
Yeah.
turn 0.
From turn 0. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for when you're Mandy and you draw that treachery, before you even take your first turn.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So this is, I think this card more than any other sort of highlights why I have troubles with the list of taboos, because people weren't playing this card because it cost too much XP most of the time. They weren't playing the card because the card doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do what players need it to do. And
Um,
subtracting an XP from it doesn't fix that. You're still running into all the issues that the card had in the first place. So, I mean, they've done this in the past where they have chained and unchained a card. I think it was like the Springfield was the first card that they unchained and then later mutated it to actually do what players wanted it to do. So I could see Sharpshooter eventually coming off the chained unchained list and going on and being mutated to actually do something and solve the problem that needs to be solved.
Yep. Just need to wait till August 2025.
That's right. Since we're only getting these updates once a year, which is more problematic than anything. I think just the lack of updates is really is a big issue. So who knows? Maybe they will sort of address the issues with Sharpshooter itself and not just dock the XP cost, because I don't think that that's not going to change my mind whether to play the card or not. It's what the card does, and I don't think the card does enough at the moment to.
Yeah, well, that's been true about like the entirety of the taboo lists. Is they seem to take a pretty conservative approach, and they have infrequent updates. Like I could see taking a conservative approach, like a stair-step approach, but having like frequent updates. Or you have rare updates and you take like big, make big steps and big changes. But conservative and infrequent is kind of problematic.
So there were a couple of other cards added to the list this time. Chained. The first was Runic Axe, which had its upgrade, the Inscription of the Hunt, chained to add +1 XP.
Weird wording. Yeah, so it's like, is it 2 checkboxes then?
I guess.
Yeah, I guess that works. So this one's actually kind of interesting because it cuts down on the number of on the possible combinations that your Runic Axe can have when it's fully buffed at 10 checkboxes. So this one's kind of interesting. I think this is the type of stuff where like a taboo list and chaining actually works. Because you're changing the available combos.
Yeah.
At 10. Yeah, that one's interesting. That's kind of like how a miniatures game, they'll like change the point values of like different units in order to like kind of control what is available, at the edge cases to the players. So like this is kind of interesting. It means you can't go like full on a 10 XP one. I haven't played with Runic Axe very much, but I knew it was pretty mighty when it was fully powered. And I guess this means that if you want to play Inscription of the Hunt, you have to dump, I'm guessing, Elders. The one that discovers clues. Yeah.
Yeah. Just as a reminder, Inscription of the Hunt is the one that you may immediately move to a connecting location or engage an enemy at your location, and it costs 1 XP. So now it will cost you 2 XP, I guess, to get that, which will make you have to make a choice as to if you're going full on with the axe, you'll have to give up something.
Okay, that makes sense because like looking at the axe, I admit I haven't played it very much, but I mean you can stack. What do we got here? You can if you stack Glory, Elders, and Hunt all together. Oh yeah, and then you gotta like use Script Weaver. So now you're looking at 7. Okay, so if you do like that's 7 checkboxes right there. You get Glory, Elders, Hunt, Script Weaver. Then basically all you have left is like Ancient Power or Saga. Now, I admit I'm not an expert at this, but stacking Glory, Elders, and Hunt, that's a lot of action compression. A lot of action compression, because you're looking at, drawing a card and discovering a clue and moving and engaging. That's 5 actions worth of effort in plus the fight test itself. That's like 5 actions worth of effort in one action. That's kind of a lot. And it sounds like, yeah, looking at it, because all the other action compression abilities are one checkbox as well, that kind of means that adding an XP to a hunt kind of makes, okay, it's kind of like worth, you have to like basically give up another action's worth of compression, kinda. Okay. Yeah, sort of ramble there, but like short version is like, this seems about right, like for what a chain list could do. Well, it's like you're doubling because you have to dump something else.
The final card that was added to the list is Shed a Light from the Scarlet Keys Investigator expansion. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anybody that it now costs plus 2 XP, because it was one of the best clue discovery cards, one of the best level 0 clue discovery cards in the game as written. Just as a reminder, Shed a Light Survivor event, Insight Trick trait costs 2 resources. Tests icons are Intellect and Agility. Fast, play before revealing a Chaos token during the investigation you are performing, and only if the difficulty of this test is currently 0. This test automatically succeeds. You discover 1 additional clue at this location and 1 additional clue at any location. So you could discover 3 clues with this thing. I know that both Matastrophic and I, when we did our reviews, I think did we give this one a curse token?
No, we gave it an Elder Sign.
We gave it an Elder Sign, but yeah, it was clearly above the curve in terms of power.
Yeah. That being said, Nate, have you played with Shadow Light very much?
Yeah, this card is so stupid. Oh my god. You activate Flashlight, I get 3 clues. Why does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I've thought about Shadow Light.
Why this card ever left the printing? I know, man.
I've thought about Shadow Light a bit. So what's interesting about Shadow Light is that it costs 2, but so does Look What I Found. And I think Shadow Light is in an interesting position in that it has to be, because it takes more effort to get to Shadow Light, it has to do more than Look What I Found. You see what I mean?
I guess?
Like,
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
I don't think it's that hard to find a 2-shroud location with a flashlight.
I'm just saying, like, this is the mind. I'm just trying to get into the mind of the designers here. Now, one thing I will say, though, is I think they're doing a lot of beating around the bush and not putting freaking scavenging on the taboo list, because that's the enabler of, like, a lot of crap.
But, I think the problem with putting a card like Scavenging on the list is that you kill that entire deck.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem you run into. Yeah. Yes, but Scavenging kind of leads to a lot of weird stuff, like
it does, yeah.
Especially Scavenging level 2. I think that's what they're kind of beating around the bush. I think. I wonder if what they really want to do, and they can't, is like certain other games have done something called like a pod system, where you say like there's like 3 cards in this pod, you can only play one of the 3. So the idea is to break up combos. So you say like, well, if you play Satellite, you can't also play Scavenging. Or or if you play, or vice versa, like that. I wonder if like that's where they really need to go here, because that's where the problems really start occurring. It's not so much Satellite in itself, especially if you only play it twice a game. Like it's not so bad. But when you start recurring it, and then you start recurring all the other tools that enable the Shadow Light, so you got like resourceful, Scavenging, Old Keyring, Flashlight level 3, and you're just like getting them back, with by playing either Yorick or like Survivor cards. That's when things get ridiculous.
Yeah, and, like the fact that it combos with other stuff that you were gonna play anyway. Like, what in the is this card even doing?
Which is kind of an interesting thought, because later on in this list, they like, I think in the announcement article as well, they like specifically mention like it's burn after reading, playing it like 8 times. It's like, so if you're putting stuff in the taboo list because you can play it like 8 times, why don't you look at how you get there? Like Scavenging.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
It's interesting that you mentioned the pod system, because I mean that's the system they used for the old Call of Cthulhu LCG, where they had their list and they said, okay, you can play one of the cards on this list. So say if you were to put Shed a Light on there with the things that recur Shed of Light, then you have a choice to make. Now,
Yep.
The problem with that approach is it often is basically a soft ban on the least of the cards. The card in the combo that is not the one that's the best simply gets soft banned because nobody will ever choose that card. But I think in this case, Shed a Light was just, it was too good to begin with.
Yeah, especially when you have like was it Daryl? He's like got an inbuilt flashlight, and I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I played it. As I put it in my Daryl deck, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I beat the scenario in 5 turns. That doesn't seem right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, and also the fact that you get 3 clues in one action, and one of them can be at another location, so you kind of break
At
the.
any location. What the?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so you kind of because like if it was 3 clues at the same location, like at least you'd have some inbuilt limit there. Like you got to have clues out the location in order to get it, like
Yeah,
in order to get the full value.
It's so
Yeah, it's
silly.
true.
It's
Oh,
so
right, yeah.
silly.
Okay.
Yeah, so
What surprises me is like, why don't they just throw remove from the game after use onto a card like this if they don't want you to recur it?
Well, that's I was actually literally gonna get into like the problem with that later on, but we'll talk about it later on. Like if you slap remove from game on everything, like shouldn't you just look at how they're getting recurred? If that's like the answer,
I mean, well, that's the issue with all the Survivor cards is that
resourceful. Yeah.
recursion is part of the Survivor package. And so
Yep.
when you end up with cards like this, and the fact that you can recur cards like this, you end up with degenerate combos and
Yep.
so far they seem to want to try to address not the recursion part, probably because if they tinkered with that, you end up breaking a lot of things. I mean, you break a lot of Survivor decks rather than just Daryl, possibly.
Yeah, plus the fact that they would have to address like scavenging and like resourceful and Yorick and cycling your deck from running out of cards. Like they'd have to like do that. But the taboo list would be much shorter if they did.
Shed of Light, no real surprise that this one ended up on the list. It was pretty clear from first glance that this thing was pushed a little too much, and I mean, you just look at it and say, "Oh, I can discover 3 clues, and then I can discover clues at any location." I mean, that's just, there's no other card that does not. Now, there's one other card I did want to talk about on the Unchained list that's been on the list for a while, and that is Knowledge is Power. I am surprised at this point that they simply haven't banned that card, because
this card is so stupid.
It is causing, as they acknowledge in the announcement for the taboo list, that some of the other changes on the list are as a result of Knowledge is Power, and so I feel at this point that perhaps it's just time to send it packing with Double or Nothing as a.
Yeah, that and the Necronomicon should both.
Oh yeah, and the Necronomicon, that's true. Yeah,
the Necronomicon just causes so many other issues.
It causes sleight of hand to get tabooed, like over and over again.
Yeah, it's like sleight of hand is now all of a sudden a problem because of the Necronomicon. Knowledge is Power is a problem because of this card. Like anything that generates secrets is a problem, which is like most of more recent Seeker cards.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of recent stuff. Yeah, that's true. Plus, if you're running Knowledge is Power, like you're breaking something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Like the
you're getting something
of the
for
card
nothing.
is to ignore the cost of something else. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a card like that by design is always going to be bad.
Yeah, it's always going to be problematic. So yeah.
I mean, like it reminds me of, for anyone that's played Magic and is aware of a card called Hypergenesis, which just allows you to dump creatures into play for no cost. Like it's that kind of silly nonsense. Or Ancestral Vision, where you just cascade into it for free. It's like, that's not how this should work.
Yeah, and that's true with a lot of card games. Anytime you can like just break the resource curve, like you're gonna have trouble. This is a problem in Lord of the Rings with Vilya. It was a problem in Game of Thrones with things that you could like cheat into play. Man, it's a problem. As you say, it's a problem with Magic the Gathering. I'd imagine every card game, you just cheating cost curves, just like is kind of ridiculous and needs to
Mhm.
be banned. What's interesting about the way they describe, what's going on with knowledge is power, is like it means that the date of this list when they decided what was going to go on it was before Valentin's min deck that was like it used knowledge is power on like an investigate tome to get lots of investigate actions. But then you do it an infinite amount of times. Yeah, it's like was it the grimoire, like
Mhm.
the from the grimoire from Scarlet Keys. So you can tell like okay, so they hadn't read Valentin's deck yet. And then they hadn't read my deck that did it in Lola to hilarious effect. And then they didn't then it means they also didn't, look at like some other Ursula decks that do the exact same thing but in Ursula. And they're, but yeah, so they just had it's like knowledge's power just breaks everything it touches.
Yeah.
And I think the card that they mentioned in the article was Earthly Serenity is the card that broke the camel's back. They were like,
Yep. Can't
"Oh,
have infinite healing.
you get infinite healing? Oh no, now we have to
Oh, no, that's it. That's it. But infinite actions? No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We could say infinite actions, looping it over and over, playing that a zillion times. That's great. But can't have infinite healing. You can't do that.
So
Yep. Yeah.
and as we've been saying, plus adding a couple experience to it doesn't matter.
No.
People still buy it and you can still abuse it. It works just
Like,
as well.
2 XP is like an average upgrade in most decks, and it's like this card is easily worth 2 XP.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So
It
perhaps
also
we
makes
will.
Mystics jealous.
Yeah, I've gone out of my way to get this in Mystic decks because it's so good. It's. I think I played it in an Akachi deck, and it was like, this is an amazing card. Love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were quite a few changes to the chained unchained list. Quite a few cards came off. Oh, we forgot to mention Switchblade level. What is it? Level 2.
Yep.
It came off, but a lot of us were wondering why it was there anyway. So
Well, Maxine did say why, and this is something that I think is a bit like speaks to the larger philosophy behind at least the creation of the taboo list under Maxine. Now, Nick and Duke might be going a different direction with this, but it's been my understanding that at least half of what we see here is based on what the playtesters experience in playtesting the forthcoming expansion. And Maxine did specify that Switchblade was on the list because of Tony Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
The list with Switchblade on it, came out well before Tony Morgan. But then later Tony Morgan hit and they were like, well, Tony Morgan is only using Switchblades, so we guess we got to rein in the Switchblade. Because 1XP provides that psychological taboo-ness that means that people will try things besides Switchblade.
Mm-hmm.
That the power of it chaining one is like kind of big, and that's how it went there. And I guess now Tony Morgan is, I guess he's just a nobody. So I guess nobody likes Tony anymore. So don't have to chain it.
everybody, get out your dust off your Tony Morgan decks.
Switchblades.
Get your Switchblades out and go to town. It's
Yeah. But I think the real reason is that it's kind of silly how in the US that you could just have like Gatling guns and like rifles and stuff, but with no taboo associated with those. But like a Switchblade, can't have that. That's taboo.
That's going to do it for our look at the chained and unchained list that was released in the new FAQ. Let us know what you think about it in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. Any final thoughts, guys, on the chained and unchained list?
As I've said, I think numerous times throughout the course of these reviews, is that I don't really like the chained and unchained list. It does not solve the problems that I find with these cards, which is just the text on them itself is too strong.
Mm-hmm.
And tacking on some extra experience just feels punishing as a solo player. It doesn't feel like it's trying to curb the power of the game. It just feels like I'm being punished because I'm not playing extra copies of Delve Too Deep or whatever to get the extra XP I need to now play the cards I want to put in my deck.
I think what changing XP tries to do but fails to do is act like how point adjustments in minis games work. Where if you take this one thing, it costs more, and thus you're unable to do a different option as a result. The problem is, thanks to like campaigns, we're giving a different amounts of experience, thanks to ways of getting extra experience, thanks to things like down the rabbit hole where you can kind of cheat the experience curve, thanks to in the thick of it. That doesn't really work. It does like XP in Arkham doesn't really work like the limited resource that the chained list thinks it does.
Mhm.
However, Runic Axe, that does work because you actually have a limit of 10 checkboxes. So if you take Inscription of the Hunt, all of a sudden it costs double, and that means that that is another checkbox you cannot check because there is a cap on the number of checkboxes you can have. So I guess what I'm getting at is that I feel like the chain list, what it really wants to do is be more like pods from Call of Cthulhu, where if you take this thing, you can't take the other thing. I think that's what it thinks it's doing, but it can't seem to. It doesn't actually work that way.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, 'cause,
pods would
like,
probably be more effective.
I think what you're saying, Matastrophic, is that you want all cards to be customizable cards going forward.
Oh
God.
hell no!
So then you can chain them and unchain them and make it so you can manipulate the.
Oh my god!
That sounds awful. That sounds actually awful.
No, I totally agree with you, Matastrophic. I
Yeah.
think that the chained and unchained list is sort of trying to be that pod idea that they were using in the old Call of Cthulhu game, where it basically said, oh, you want to play Nyarlathotep? You can't play this other card because the interaction between the two is bad. It's too overpowered.
Yeah.
Tacking on XP doesn't change the power of the card, either for good or ill. I mean, you tack a bunch of extra XP on the Necronomicon, it's still the Necronomicon, it's still busted as hell. You reduce the XP cost on Sharpshooter and Rite of Equilibrium, there's still bad cards that people aren't going to play. So what's the point, right? To me, it's not doing the thing that they want it to do. And so I think what we have seen over the course of several facts is that the chained and unchained list keeps getting smaller because they keep having to mutate cards to actually do what they want to do. But they seem reluctant to want to do that because then the mutated list gets too long and you're forcing players to remember multiple changes. So I think it was a good attempt. You know, it was worth the effort, like worth seeing if this worked, but XP is not a limited resource in this game. And so trying to manipulate it, like I think it's one of those things, like it's a dial, right? It's a dial that you can fiddle with to see if it will change things. And I think we've been fiddling with it now for several years at this point, and the problem cards are still problem cards. Knowledge's power is still screwing up the design space. So time to I think move away from it.
Yeah, I wonder if part of it is that I think on average level 0 cards are so good now.
Yes,
that
I agree.
Tacking on 2 experience to knowledge's power doesn't really do anything at all to your deck. Like, okay, all I need is knowledge's power in the Necronomicon, and now all of a sudden my deck does exactly what it needs to do. Cool. That costs 12 experience versus 8. Sure, whatever. Like, who cares? Like that's the problem. Like, it doesn't actually address anything for the most part, and I think part of that is just because level 0 cards now are just so good.
Yeah, and because there's so many of them, and there's been power creep over the years that it actually comes up when I build and try to upgrade decks mid campaign a lot. Actually, it's like I look at the level 0 cards and I'm like, I'm not replacing this. Like, because there's nothing like, because it does what it does, and there's no higher level version of it. That happens quite a bit, and so I guess I don't do it. I guess I just put my XP into, I don't know, better skill cards. That's usually what ends up happening. Or permanents. I just go right to permanents. That's it. Yeah. And those are cheaper now, so that, I guess that XP funnel is not there for me as much anymore because I can't spend as much XP on permanents because the Dunwich ones are okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only world that I see using XP as some sort of dial to control the game would be if we were all playing with Dunwich Legacy experience, where experience was tight.
Mhm.
Unlike today's scenarios where you can just earn bucket loads of XP, and you got rid of all the XP boosters, like In the Thick of It, Down the Rabbit Hole, Delve Too Deep, anything that gives you extra experience. So it actually, 1 or 2 experience actually matters.
There is
But
one
at
way
this-
to do that. And that's if the individual scenarios themselves had XP caps. That'd be the way to do it. Scenario 5 of Dunwich Legacy, your XP cap is 15. Then it would work.
Yeah, it's sort of like they're manipulating experience without actually having any understanding of how the experience system is working in the game.
Yeah.
And thus they are failing to these sort of adjustments are failing to address the problem because they're adjusting a resource that isn't actually a resource in the game.
Yeah, it isn't actually as limited as it seems to assume it is.
Let us know in the comments down below what you think of Chained and Unchained, and we'll be back with our look at the lengthy list of mutated cards. So stay tuned for that. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.